All right, so we're in lesson 4 now. So at this point, we've gone through everything with the Ottomans and the Mughals. We're now heading into feudal Japan. So we have a couple words in here just that are going to give us context to what is going on in Japan. So the shogun is the military leader. This is going to be the person with all the power. That's why we are going to transition into what's going to become known as the Tokugawa Shogunate. Okay, so it's going after that term shogun. So feudalism, if you remember that from the Middle Ages, so it's the idea that you have a military hierarchy. So hierarchy is talking about like social status, in which a ruler or lord offers fighters land in exchange for loyalty. So whenever you think about feudalism, you're thinking about this idea of like you get land, you get a fiefdom, you get space where you can live, where you get to have your castle, your everything, but you have to do that in exchange for loyalty for the person who actually owns the land. Then you have the samurai, which is the warrior class in feudal Japan. So these would be like our knights in the Middle Ages. The daimyo, which are powerful lords in feudal Japan. So when we're thinking about this, and you'll see it in a little bit, but you got your shogun at the top with the authority, and then you have your daimyo, all right, kind of right below them. And then this is our key word, our super important word for this: isolation. So being in a place or situation that is separate from others. So if you're falling into isolation, you are isolated. And this can be something that you can do to yourself or that someone can do for you. In this case, for Japan, they're going to do it themselves. All right, so we need to make sure that we understand where Japan is. So Japan is a series of islands. It's an archipelago just off the coast of Korea. Up here you have China. Okay, so when we're looking for Japan, we're looking for the series of islands kind of near Korea, near China, near Russia, and they're going to control the majority of those areas. So, under the Tokugawa Shogunate, so this all starts in 1603. At this point, we're now kind of getting into the idea that we're going to have documentation of things that are happening. All right, so the Tokugawa Ieyasu seized power over Japan and established the Tokugawa Shogunate. This Tokugawa Shogunate is going to unify Japan. If you remember, this was one of our words from the Mughals. It is going to bring together. All right, so it's going to bring together Japan and ended all previous civil wars. And then the Tokugawa Shogunate is going to rule Japan for 250 years. So if we add that together, this is going to last roughly till about we were in 1603. So it's going to last until 1853. I think like 1863 is officially when the Commodore Matthew Perry shows up. So the Tokugawa Shogunate kept their power by controlling their people and their cities. So again, we're back to that idea of this is very absolute. Okay, they're going to be in charge. They're not going to allow anyone else to be in charge, and they're going to make sure that everyone is doing what they want. They keep direct control over the economy. So they get to decide who is allowed to trade. So this is all government decided. So the government is going to decide who gets to trade with who, what countries they're trade with, whether you as a person are going to be allowed to trade, and they're going to be in charge of the economy. They're not going to let individual people make choices. So under the Tokugawa Shogunate, the emperor is at the top. So we see here, and you have this in your notes, the emperor's at the top, but they are a figurehead, which means they have no power. And then you have the shogun, which is all the power. And then the daimyos are below them, the samurai, the peasants, the artisans, and the merchants. They considered merchants at the very bottom because these people didn't actually make any product. They saw people who just sold other people's products as being less than. So the emperor was at the top, however, they have no real power. The shogun has all the power. Okay, and then they created a system of complete loyalty and obedience to the shogun. So the daimyos weren't loyal to the emperor, they were loyal to the shogun. The emperor was just sitting at the top. They didn't actually have any power or authority in what was going on. The shogun would demand, so this is just some examples. So these are all examples of things the shogun would do. So the shogun would demand that the daimyos would have to live in the capital city. So they actually had to show up, live there, bring their family, and do all that. The daimyo actually had to pay for this, which meant that they had no money. Okay, so they had no money to plan an uprising against the shogun. They were spending all their money traveling to and from. They had to keep a home wherever they were from, as well as keep a space where in the capital city with the shogun. And at any point, if the shogun thought the daimyo was attempting, which just means that they just had to think about it. So anyone who wanted their power could just get the shogun to question. So if they got anyone to just question their loyalty, then they would immediately take away any privileges and land the daimyo had, and they would give it to somebody else. So they would just give it to another, and then they would just be like, hey, you're now in charge. And this person would then be exiled. Their family would be exiled. Anyone who was connected to them would be exiled. And they would be forced to kind of just like leave, and they couldn't come back. So this is what's going to lead, and this is going to be something where we're going to see a huge difference from the Ottomans and Mughals. So the Ottomans and Mughals are going to be very different than what the Tokugawa are going to do. So they followed a policy of national seclusion, and that just means isolation. So they basically isolated their people enough so that no one would rebel. So they feared people converting to Christianity. That was a huge fear, because if you would convert to Christianity instead of listening to the shogun, you follow God. And the shoguns didn't want to be questioned even by the idea of God. So in the 1930s, they shut off all trade with Europeans, which again is the exact opposite of what we saw with the Ottomans and the Mughals, where they encouraged that trade. They wanted that trade with the empire, but they were the Europeans, the shoguns and the Tokugawa are going to say, nope, they're done. Japanese is forbidden to travel other countries. Foreigners are banned from Japan. If you did travel to another country, you were killed when you returned. And foreigners were banned. If foreigners showed up, then they were going to end up basically being arrested. This isolation prevented Japanese from getting any new ideas. So no new ideas, no technology for the next 200 years. So in 1860, when the Americans show up, Japan is living like the 1660s. They have not changed, or the 1630s, I apologize, I just saw it. The 1630s. So they're living like the 1630s. They are still fighting with swords and on, horseback, or using basic, boats. They're not using steam engines. They're not using automatic weapons. They're not doing anything that the Europeans are doing at this time. And that's going to basically cause Japan to be easily forced kind of like in and taken over very quickly, which is ultimately going to lead to a Meiji restoration, which we'll talk about later. So your job right now is to read this, document and answer those 2 questions on the bottom of this page, as well as then complete the exit ticket. And I'll see you in the next lesson.